On the day I laid my wife, Margaret, to rest, I stayed silent in front of the crowd of family and friends. None of them knew she had left me not only the house we lived in Savannah, Georgia, but also a second secret home on Tybee Island. My son, Ethan Collins, 35 years old, and his wife Caroline showed up at the funeral with a face of false grief, but their eyes glimmered with a greed I could not ignore. They thought I was old, my memory fading, and that I would be easy to manipulate. But they were wrong. In revenge stories, the one who seems weakest often holds the most powerful card. And I knew well I needed to keep that secret house hidden, at least until the truth was revealed. Ethan and Caroline didn't just want the main house, they wanted control over my entire future. And they were ready to stage a performance of a senile father to strip me of everything. I knew that with just one wrong move, I could lose it all, from the home meant for my final years to the dignity of a grieving husband. But I also knew, if I stayed silent at the right time and delivered the final blow, the truth would destroy their ambitions, and this was only the beginning. My name is Richard Collins. I am 62 years old. My entire life has been tied to carpentry in Savannah, Georgia, a peaceful city that still carries hidden undercurrents. I was never wealthy, but I was proud to have raised my family with my own hands, building every frame, every table for homes in town. My wife, Margaret, was my loyal partner and guiding light for 40 years. She was meticulous, careful, and always thought ahead. Her habit was to keep a brown leather notebook, recording every expense and every important document, from insurance to property deeds. I still remember clearly, on a summer afternoon 2 years ago, Margaret placed that notebook in my hands and said, "Richard, if the day ever comes when I go before you, remember to read the last page carefully. I want you to have a safeguard when everything changes." I nodded, not thinking much at the time, until the day she passed away. On that last page was written about a second house in Tybee Island, under my sole name, along with a note. "Never let anyone force you to sign any document when your mind is unclear. Georgia law protects you. You only lose everything when you put down the pen yourself." Evidence. Handwritten note, July 12, 2021. Never let anyone force you to sign. The house on Tybee Island isn't far. Just about an hour's drive from Savannah. It's a small white house facing the ocean, the place we often visited every summer. In the kitchen, the tea set Margaret loved to use each morning still sits there, and on the long wooden table remains a scratch from the time I slipped with a hammer. To me, that house isn't just property, it's memory, the place where I hear the waves mixing with her laughter. Margaret and I had one son, Ethan. As a boy, he was smart and eager to learn, but as he grew older, he carried more ambition than patience. I remember the days he returned from college full of stories about technology, cryptocurrency, and quick ways to get rich. I didn't stop him, but I knew Ethan often failed, hid his debts, and eventually came back leaning on us. His wife, Caroline, had a sweet tongue and knew how to charm outsiders, but I always sensed calculation behind her eyes. "Dad, I just want to help you manage everything. You don't have to worry anymore," Ethan once told me during a dinner after the funeral. Caroline sat beside him, smiling softly. "That's right, Richard. You should rest. Let us take care of things." I only nodded, masking my suspicion. I knew too well, behind those sweet words was the desire to seize what Margaret and I had worked so hard to protect. In the days following the funeral, I noticed changes. Ethan started checking the utility bills. Caroline asked questions about bank accounts, even hinted that, at this age, memory isn't what it used to be. I stayed silent, but inside, I was on guard. In a small wooden cabinet in my study, I carefully stored the original will, the property deed of the second house, and the journal I had begun to keep after Margaret's death. I wrote down each day, every sentence Ethan spoke, every glance from Caroline. I knew someday those lines would become evidence, a shield to protect myself. "Dad, have you noticed yourself forgetting things lately?" Caroline asked once, her voice gentle but full of suggestion. I smirked. "If I forget, how do I still remember you like decaf coffee every morning?" Ethan glanced at Caroline, then quickly changed the subject. In that moment, I knew my suspicion wasn't wrong. Margaret's words echoed in my head each night. I kept the habit of sitting at the wooden table, holding the brown leather notebook, reading her lines over and over. They were reminders, an unwritten law I had to follow. Never sign any document under pressure, because that signature could be the blade that ends everything. I promised her, and I would never let that promise be broken. Yet, when I began hearing whispers among relatives saying, "Richard doesn't seem all that sharp anymore," I realized something unusual was forming, a storm I could not avoid. The funeral had ended less than a week ago, and I was still clearing out the wilted flowers in the living room when Ethan walked in. His face carrying a seriousness so forced it looked fake. He didn't ask about my health, nor did he mention his mother. Instead, the first words out of his mouth cut me like a knife. "Dad, I think it's time we sell this house. You live here alone. You don't need all these rooms. The money could support you in retirement." I dropped the teacup in my hand. The sound of porcelain hitting the wooden table rang sharp and cold. I stared into my son's eyes and saw not sorrow, but impatience, even a flicker of eagerness. My chest tightened, heavy with both grief and fury. Caroline sat behind him, holding a glass of orange juice, tilting her head with a sweet smile. "Richard, you don't have to worry. We'll handle everything. Keeping such a big house is expensive these days. Let us take that burden." I bit down hard on my lip. Her words sounded tender, but every syllable dripped with possession. At that moment, I thought of the second house on Tybee Island, the one Margaret had left for me alone. I decided to stay silent about it, at least for now. "I'm the sole heir," Ethan pressed on, his tone sharper. "You should let me manage everything. It'll be safer for you." I caught how he emphasized the word heir, as if Margaret's freshly covered grave was nothing more than a justification for his claim. My hand trembled, not from fear but from rage pushing against my veins. Margaret's voice echoed in my mind. "You only lose everything when you put down the pen." I swore to myself I would never let that happen. That evening, in my room, I opened the computer and checked the shared email account Margaret and I had used. What I found froze me in place. An email Ethan had sent to Caroline just days earlier, with the subject line, "Plan after funeral." Evidence. Email. March 15th, 2023. Content. "Once Dad agrees, we sell the main house fast. After that, we'll figure out the second place." My heart sank. They weren't just after this house. They already knew about the second one. And yet all afternoon they had pretended otherwise. I sat there for hours, reading and rereading those lines. My hands shook with fury, my throat tightened until I could hardly breathe. Margaret's fears before she passed hadn't been unfounded. She had seen this coming, while I had naively believed Ethan only needed time to mature. Now the truth was clear. He had turned our family's loss into his chance for profit. The next day, Ethan returned, this time carrying a thin folder. He set it down on the table and spoke quickly. "Dad, all you need to do is sign this. It's just a power of attorney. Don't worry about anything. I'll take care of the paperwork, sell the house, and bring the money back for you." I looked at the papers, feeling the blood rush to my head. Ethan forced a smile. "You're still sharp enough to know I'm doing the right thing for you, aren't you?" I stared at him for a long time, swallowing the fire burning in my chest, and finally answered, "I need more time." That night, I sat in my study, opened Margaret's leather notebook, and added another line. March 16th. Ethan brought over power of attorney papers, pushed me to sign. Caroline stayed silent but stared at me the entire time. Email proving their plot has been saved. I knew the battle had officially begun. The lamplight cast shadows over the wedding photo of Margaret and me, and for a moment I felt as though she was still watching. I whispered, "I won't let you down." I locked the folder away in the cabinet, alongside the original will and the deed to the Tybee Island house. I knew Ethan wouldn't stop. He would return, stronger and more reckless than before. And I also knew the real storm had only just begun, but worse was coming. After the afternoon Ethan brought his lawyer over, I knew things would not stop there. I had thought they were only probing, trying to soften me with sweet words so I would give in, but I was wrong. My life began to warp day by day, and the 3 incidents that followed cut into my peace like blades slicing through flesh. The first incident began on what seemed like an ordinary morning. I woke early, as I had done for years, planning to drive to the lumber store to buy some boards to fix the shaky bookshelf in the living room. I slipped on my old jacket, picked up my wallet, but as I stepped toward the door, Caroline blocked the threshold. Her smile was still sugar-coated, but her voice was a velvet-wrapped knife. "Dad, you don't need to do these things anymore. You're old now. What if something happens? Just let us handle it." I froze, then quietly replied, "I can still swing a hammer, Caroline. I've done it my whole life." Yet when I returned to my room to grab my wallet, the drawer was empty. I asked Ethan, and he calmly said, "Dad, I put it away for safety. You've been forgetful. What if you drop it?" His words painted me as nothing more than a senile old man who couldn't even hold on to his own money. I swallowed my anger, shame burning my throat, but inside my chest was a raging fire. From that day forward, I felt I was no longer the master of my own home. The second incident struck only a few days later. During dinner, while I was quietly picking at my food, Caroline answered a call and didn't notice that I could hear every word. "The beach house will sell for a good price. As soon as the old man agrees to sign, we'll have both." My chopsticks clattered onto the table. Caroline hung up quickly, forcing a smile. "It was nothing, Richard. Don't worry about it." Across the table, Ethan's eyes flickered with caution before he dropped his gaze to his plate. But I already knew. The secret of the Tybee Island house was no longer a secret. They knew, and now they were only waiting for the right moment to strike. That night, I opened my computer, dug through the inbox, and printed out an email Ethan had sent to a friend. In it, he wrote, "We'll push Dad harder this week. The beach house must be included." Evidence, email, March 18, 2023, "We'll push Dad harder this week. The beach house must be included." My hands trembled as I stared at those words. They weren't content with the main house. They were coming for the place Margaret had entrusted me to guard at all costs. From that day on, my house felt suffocating. I locked every document in the safe and hid the key in a place only I knew. Still, I felt watched, like unseen eyes were always on me. My phone rang constantly with relatives calling, all echoing the same line. "Richard, you should listen to your son. Let him manage things. It's better for you." I knew Ethan had planted the story in their heads that I was no longer of sound mind. To them, I was now just a stubborn old man too blind to see reason. The third incident landed like a direct blow. One afternoon, Ethan returned with a man in a black suit, slicked hair, and a leather briefcase in hand. "Dad, this is Mr. Harris, my lawyer. He'll help you sort out the paperwork so you won't have to worry." I sat in the living room as they walked in. Harris placed a thin folder on the table, his voice smooth as glass. "Mr. Collins, this is just a temporary power of attorney. It will help your son handle things quickly, spare you any trouble. All it needs is your signature." I looked down at the paper, the words blurring, twisting like they were mocking me. For a moment, Margaret's warning rang in my ears. Never sign when under pressure. I lifted my head, locking eyes with Ethan. "I need more time," I said slowly, deliberately. The air in the room thickened. Harris forced a polite smile, but Ethan's jaw clenched, his eyes burning red. Behind them, Caroline gripped her glass so hard her knuckles turned white. I stood, ending the meeting by walking out, leaving them in uneasy silence. The next day, the rumors spread fast. A cousin called, her voice heavy with pity. "Richard, I heard you're no longer able to manage your own paperwork. Maybe it's time to let Ethan handle it." I sighed deeply, the weight of isolation pressing down on me. Even those who once stood close now leaned toward Ethan's side. I had no one left in my corner, except the memory of Margaret and the documents I guarded like my last line of defense. I knew Ethan and Caroline were ready to take another step, one that would cross the line. Those 3 incidents, back to back, made me realize I no longer lived in a home, but on a battlefield disguised as one. Ethan and Caroline were tightening their grip, feeding everyone an image of me as a frail old man losing his grip on reality. I was being pushed to the margins, stripped of trust, stripped of respect. But I was not a man who bowed easily. I knew the storm had only just begun. In my journal, I wrote one more line in bold ink. March 20th, Ethan and Caroline are preparing to go too far. I must be ready. Deep down, I felt it clearly. They were preparing to overreach. I once believed that if I simply held my ground, refused to sign anything, I would be safe. But I underestimated the greed of Ethan and Caroline. The first 3 incidents were nothing more than rehearsals, and now their mask began to slip. I realized behind their relentless pressure was a bigger scheme. A hidden hand I had not yet fully seen. One morning in late March, I received a call from the bank where Margaret and I had once kept a savings account. The polite employee asked, "Mr. Collins, we received a request to change the joint holder of your account. Can you confirm?" I froze. I had never filed such a request. When I pressed for details, the employee explained it had come through email with an electronic signature under my name. My blood boiled. Ethan wasn't stopping at the houses. He was now reaching for the money Margaret had left behind. That night, I quietly searched through the old case Margaret had kept, where she had saved every printed transaction. I compared each signature, every number, and saw the so-called change request looked uncomfortably similar to my handwriting. Ethan had forged my signature. Evidence, bank log, March 25, 2023, request to add Ethan Collins as joint account holder. My heart pounded, sweat slid down my temples. I realized his real plan wasn't just to take the main house or the Tybee Island property. He wanted to erase me entirely from everything, to leave me with nothing. The following day, Ethan appeared, forcing a weak smile. "Dad, the bank probably called you today, right?" "Don't worry, I just want to make things easier. You don't have the energy to handle it all anymore, so let me sign for you." I growled. "You forged my signature." Ethan smirked, then hissed back. "Who's going to believe you? You can't even remember where you put your keys these days. Go ahead, tell the family. They'll just think you're senile." A wave of fury surged through me, but I held it down. If I exploded, he would have the perfect excuse to claim I was losing control. I was already losing on my own turf. Caroline stood behind him, her eyes cold. "Richard, we only want to take care of you. You should be grateful." I turned away, unwilling to let them see the pain in my eyes. I realized I was slowly being isolated. Relatives who once came to visit now only spoke to Ethan, convinced by his story that my memory was slipping. One cousin even called me, voice dripping with pity. "Richard, everyone says you're not clear-headed anymore. Maybe it's best to hand things over to Ethan. Don't resist." Those words stung like a slap to the face. I knew I was losing the battle in the court of opinion. For a moment of weakness, I wondered if I should just surrender, let Ethan take whatever he wanted. I was tired, alone, and felt the ground slipping beneath me. But then, when I opened Margaret's leather notebook and saw her words again, "Never let anyone force you to sign when your mind is unclear," something lit up inside me. She had seen this day coming, and she had left me a way out. The climax of their arrogance came when Ethan openly gathered the entire family in my home for a so-called family meeting. I sat in the middle of the living room while Ethan stood tall like some politician. "My father is no longer competent to manage things. I've spoken with my lawyer. The best thing is for him to sign the power of attorney so I can handle everything." Some nodded along. Caroline sat smiling faintly beside him. I sat frozen, staring at the faces that once felt familiar but now had turned against me. I wanted to stand up and scream that they were liars, that I was perfectly clear-headed, that they had forged my signature. But I knew without proof, my words would be nothing but whispers in the wind. And I knew Ethan had prepared for this, ready to twist any outburst of mine into evidence that I was losing control. So I stayed silent, though a storm raged inside me. That day, I lost the meeting, at least temporarily. That night, I sat alone at the wooden table, staring into the dark yard outside. The weight of failure and loneliness pressed heavy on my shoulders. But when I turned over the folder, saw the original notarized will, the deed to the Tybee Island house in my name, and the recording I had carefully saved of Ethan confessing his debts, I realized I still had weapons. These, if unleashed at the right time, would strike like a blade. Margaret had left me a shield. Georgia law clearly stated that any transfer or power of attorney was only valid if signed while competent and without coercion. I had kept her advice, never signing anything, leaving Ethan no legitimate path. I opened my journal and added a line. March 28th, temporary defeat. Ethan and Caroline have shown their true scheme. Time to plan the counterattack. I sat still, drew in a long breath, then whispered, "If they want war, they'll have it. And I won't fight with fists, but with truth and the law." From that moment, I began to think of revenge built on the very rule Margaret had left me. And I knew, The counterstrike would be one they would never forget. When night fell, the big house turned silent, and I sat at the wooden table, spreading out the papers I had kept hidden all this time. I knew that if I continued only defending myself, I would lose, because Ethan had already used relatives, public opinion, and even a lawyer to build the facade that I was a senile old man. I needed a plan, a strategy strong enough to turn the tide. That was when I began laying out each step, following a principle I called in my head CAGE. Collect, align, gamble, edge. Collect. I unlocked the drawer and took out Margaret's original will, the deed to the Tybee Island house, and the journal where I had recorded every incident in detail. I added printed emails Ethan had said to Caroline after the funeral, and another one he wrote to a friend about pushing Dad hard to get the beach house. I also kept a copy of the forged bank log with the false signature. I placed everything in a thick folder and clipped it tight. Beyond documents, I secretly used the small recorder Margaret had once bought me to capture a conversation with Ethan. One afternoon, I pretended to be weak and asked, "How much money do you really need?" He blurted out, "You don't understand, I'm over 200 grand in debt. If I can't get the house, my life is over." I saved that recording, labeling it in my computer as Song of Ethan. It would be my most powerful proof when the time came. Align. Gather allies. I understood I couldn't stand against two younger people and a lawyer all by myself. I needed witnesses, people willing to stand by me. First, I turned to Mary Jenkins, our longtime neighbor and Margaret's close friend. She had seen Ethan raise his voice at his mother many times, had heard Margaret admit her fears about his greed. When I knocked on her door, Mary only had to look into my eyes to understand. "Richard, I'll tell the truth if I have to. I owe Margaret too much. She always believed you were her last line of defense." I gripped her hand, feeling hope flicker alive. Next, I sought out Margaret's old lawyer, Mr. Peterson, the man who drafted the will and witnessed the deed naming the Tybee house under my name alone. He listened carefully, then nodded. "If needed, I will testify in court. But you must be cautious. They might set up a scenario to trap you into signing." I nodded, knowing time was running out. I also contacted the bank, asking for an official statement, proving I had never filed a request to add Ethan as co-owner. The clerk agreed to prepare a notarized document. With each piece, the wall I was building around myself grew stronger. Gamble. Play weak. I knew that to flip the game, I had to lure Ethan and Caroline into my trap. I decided to temporarily appear fragile, accepting small demands so they believed I was faltering. I pretended to ask Caroline about the cost of nursing homes, acting as if I was considering moving out. Her eyes lit up instantly. I deliberately left the lights on a few times or left my keys lying on the table where Ethan could notice. Every act was designed to make them think I was slowly losing capacity. I knew this was a dangerous game. If they moved too fast, I might be forced into a corner before I could react. But I had to take the risk, because only when they believed I was truly weakening would they dare to reveal their full scheme. Edge, secure advantage. I staged the final act, a family meeting, just like the one they had held before, except this time I would control it. I pretended to agree with Ethan that I would consider signing as long as relatives were present to witness. Ethan jumped at the chance, convinced I had finally caved. But I knew this was the hand I held. While preparing, I arranged the files, recordings, testimonies, and legal documents. Everything was labeled and ready to be revealed at the deciding moment. Yet I still kept one final card hidden, something even Mary didn't know. That would be the ultimate strike, revealed only when absolutely necessary. I was acutely aware of the risks waiting. Ethan could accuse me of diminished capacity, and if the family sided with him, the court might appoint a guardian. Caroline could stumble upon the safe key and destroy the evidence I had prepared. Harris could construct a seemingly airtight case to trap me into signing before I could react. One slip and all I had built would collapse. I never forgot Margaret's words. Not one wrong step. Late that night, as I wrote in my journal, I felt both anxious and determined. I knew I had moved from defense to offense. The evidence, the allies, and my act of weakness had become the iron cage waiting to lock Ethan and Caroline in. I believed when the family meeting arrived, they would have no escape. But then, just as I closed the notebook, The phone rang. It was Mary, her voice trembling. "Richard, I just saw Caroline standing in front of my house. She seemed to be looking for something. I'm afraid they suspect." My grip tightened on the phone, my heartbeat hammering in my chest. If Caroline discovered I had prepared witnesses, everything could crumble. My plan had seemed flawless, but now, an unexpected twist threatened to shatter it all. And I knew the battle was about to become fiercer than ever. I knew the day of reckoning had to come. After weeks of collecting evidence, gathering allies, and pretending to be weak, it was time to execute every step of the cage plan. I took a deep breath, lifted my eyes to the wedding picture of Margaret and me hanging in the living room. I whispered, "I'm ready now, Margaret." Step 1, collect. I opened the safe and pulled out every document I had prepared. Margaret's original will with her signature and notarization, the deed to the Tybee Island house under my sole name, the journal filled with every recorded incident, printed emails Ethan had sent Caroline, and the bank log showing the forged signature. I placed them all into an old leather case and locked it. In the smaller pocket, I placed the recorder containing Ethan's own voice admitting to his debts. I repeated each item to myself like a soldier checking his weapons before marching into battle. Step 2. A line I called Mary Jenkins, reminding her of our arrangement. She would be at the family meeting, ready to testify that Margaret had confided her fear of Ethan's greed and had left the Tybee house for me alone. I also spoke with Mr. Peterson, Margaret's former attorney, instructing him to bring the copy of the will stored in his office files. His reply was short but firm. "Richard, I'll be there. The truth is on your side." I called the bank clerk too, requesting she bring the notarized statement proving I had never filed to add Ethan onto the account. The final piece of the puzzle was in place. Relief washed over me, though a shadow of unease lingered in my chest. Step 3, gamble. The family meeting took place in my own living room. Ethan buzzed with excitement, convinced I had finally given in. Caroline moved about arranging chairs, her face glowing with certainty. Relatives streamed in, many casting me looks heavy with pity, as though I were truly the senile old man Ethan had painted me to be. Ethan stood, speaking with the confidence of a politician. "We all know my father isn't clear-headed anymore. This is the power of attorney. If he signs, I'll take care of the property and ensure he lives in comfort." Some nodded, others whispered. I sat motionless, feigning confusion, my hands trembling slightly. I heard Caroline lean toward Ethan and murmur, "He'll sign today for sure." Step 4, expose. When Ethan slid the power of attorney before me, I slowly opened my leather case. The room grew still. I pulled out Margaret's will, laying it on the table. "This is her signature, notarized, confirming the Tybee Island house belongs solely to me," I said, my voice low but steady. I produced the deed, and this is the legal proof no one can contest. I locked eyes with Ethan, then unfolded the printed email. "Here's what you wrote to Caroline and to your friend, saying you would push me to give up both houses." I read aloud line by line, sparing no detail. Murmurs swept through the room. Evidence, email printout, March 18th, 2023. "We'll push Dad harder this week. The beach house must be included." I wasn't done. I laid down the bank log. "And here's proof you forged my signature." Several relatives jumped to their feet, eyes wide. Caroline's face went pale. Ethan tried to keep composure, but his hands shook visibly. Finally, I pressed the button on the recorder. Ethan's voice echoed, "I'm over 200 grand in debt. If I can't get the house, I'm finished." The room fell into stunned silence. The major setback. Just when I thought I had seized total control, Attorney Harris, standing firmly at Ethan's side, produced another folder. His tone was ice-cold. "Mr. Collins, this is a medical evaluation we obtained from your family doctor. It shows cognitive decline, signs of senility. The court can appoint a guardian on this basis." I froze. All eyes swung back to me, suspicion creeping in once more. Ethan smirked, triumphant. "See, Dad? We only want what's best for you. Everyone thinks the same." It felt as if my entire plan was collapsing. My hands shook, nearly dropping my folder. Margaret's words rang inside me. "Never let them prove you've lost control." I drew in a deep breath, forcing myself to steady. I had to turn this around now, or everything would fall apart. Adaptation, I lifted my head, staring straight at Harris. "If you truly believe in that evaluation, why bother forcing me to sign? If I were really incompetent, my signature would have no legal value. The room froze. I pressed on. Georgia law is clear. Any power of attorney is valid only if signed in a competent state of mind. The very fact you keep pressing me to sign proves you know I am perfectly sound. My words cut like a blade. Some relatives nodded, murmuring agreement. Mary rose, her voice steady. Margaret told me herself the Tybee house was meant for Richard alone, because she feared Ethan's greed. I will testify. Peterson added, I drafted that will and witnessed Margaret's signature. It is absolutely valid. The wall Ethan had built began to crack. I felt the air shift. Doubt now turned toward Ethan and Caroline. Harris fell silent, unable to answer immediately. Ethan's face flushed red with fury. Caroline clutched his hand, whispering something I couldn't catch. I knew they weren't done yet. I looked around the room at the expectant faces of my family, some still confused, others beginning to see the truth. I closed the leather case, drawing a deep breath. I had seized the upper hand again, but I knew the war wasn't over. Because in my mind, one thought was sharp and undeniable. Everything that had just happened was only the beginning. I still had one card left to play, one final strike that could end their ambitions completely. And I whispered to myself like a vow, one last move. The morning of the decisive hearing, Savannah's sky was draped in dark clouds, wind cutting through the empty streets. I walked slowly into the probate lawyer's office. My old leather case clutched tightly in hand. Inside, Ethan and Caroline were already seated, Harris beside them. My son's face glowed with confidence, and Caroline wore a triumphant smile. They truly believed today would be the day I fell. Attorney Peterson, the presiding counsel, opened firmly. We are here to review the dispute regarding Mr. Collins's property and management rights. Each side may present its evidence. Harris immediately rose, his tone icy. Richard Collins has shown clear signs of memory decline. Here is a medical evaluation. We ask the court to recognize the power of attorney and grant authority to Ethan Collins. Ethan lifted his chin, his arrogant gaze sweeping over me as though he already owned the verdict. I sat still, letting them spill every word. When Harris closed his file, I slowly placed my case on the table, unclasped it, and spread the documents. The atmosphere shifted instantly. I raised Margaret's original will, notarized and signed. This is the legal will. It states clearly the Tybee Island house belongs solely to me. Ethan faltered, sweat beginning to glisten on his forehead. I laid down the deed to the Tybee house. This is legal proof, undeniable. Murmurs rippled across the room, eyes narrowing on Ethan. I pressed forward. I pulled out an email Ethan had sent Caroline just days after the funeral and read it aloud. Once Dad agrees, we sell the main house fast. After that, we'll figure out the second place. Whispers erupted. Caroline turned pale, Ethan bit his lip. Then I revealed another email, one he had sent to a friend. We'll push Dad harder this week. The beach house must be included. My voice rang steady, sharp. Relatives shook their heads, doubt giving way to contempt. I knew this was the moment to strike again. I laid the bank log on the table, pointing at the signature. This document proves my son forged my name to add himself to my account. Peterson examined it, then nodded. This signature doesn't match the official records. This is forgery. Ethan leapt to his feet, shouting, That's a mistake! Dad is lying. But his voice drowned in the stir of relatives. The truth had become undeniable. I didn't give them time to recover. I pulled out the small recorder and pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, raw and damning. I'm over 200 grand in debt. If I can't get the house, I'm finished. Gasps filled the air, relatives covering their mouths in shock. Caroline dropped her head, tears spilling down her cheeks, but no one believed them anymore. Finally, I revealed the card I had kept hidden, my strongest proof. A copy of Margaret's handwritten note from her leather journal, verified by handwriting experts and notarized. I read slowly, my voice tight. Never let anyone force you to sign. The Tybee house is your shield. The room turned heavy, then erupted. Peterson confirmed, this evidence is fully valid. Margaret's final will has been honored. I turned to my son, my words like chisels carving into him. You betrayed both your mother and me. You turned our grief into an excuse to feed your greed. But today, justice speaks. Ethan's face drained of color, his lips stuttering. Caroline hunched, unable to meet a single eye. Harris sat rigid, his arguments reduced to ashes. Peterson stood, voice firm. The power of attorney you presented is void. The forged documents and coercion will be referred for investigation. Ethan Collins may face serious legal consequences. As of now, Richard Collins remains the sole legal owner of all property. The room fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted with murmurs. Some relatives approached me, placing a hand on my shoulder, whispering, "Richard, you did the right thing. Justice has prevailed." I nodded, my eyes stinging. There was no gloating, only a deep release. Proof that I had kept my promise to Margaret. Ethan slumped in his chair, face ashen. Caroline rose abruptly, hurrying out without looking back. Everything they had built, the forged schemes, the lies, the manipulation, collapsed right where they thought they would triumph. And in that moment, I felt it clearly. Justice had been served. Ethan lost all credibility, his lawyer withdrew in silence, and Caroline's dreams of wealth were shattered. They lost not only property, but dignity and the trust of the entire family. Justice served, complete and undeniable. After that fateful confrontation at the lawyer's office, Ethan and Caroline's lives veered down a path neither of them had ever imagined. Relatives no longer saw them as a promising young couple, but as two greedy liars. Whispers spread through the community, old friends turned their backs, and the bank began scrutinizing every transaction Ethan made. The forged signature became a permanent stain, clinging to him like a sentence yet to be declared. Caroline, once so proud of her charm and ambition, now faced a marriage on the verge of collapse. With no assets left to cling to, her dreams of wealth crumbled along with the last traces of trust from the family. As for me, I chose to leave the main house and move into the Tybee Island home. That white house facing the sea became my sanctuary, a place where each morning I could hear the waves and remember Margaret. I brewed my own tea, ran my hand across the old scratch in the wooden table, and felt peace. No more shadows of suspicion, no more whispers plotting to strip me of what was mine. I lived independently, kept every document secure, and above all, kept my promise to my late wife, to protect our legacy and my dignity to the very end. Despite the bitterness, I still held hope for Ethan. I once told my son, "If one day you truly repent, if you stand tall and face the truth, I will listen. But the help will never be about property. It will be about how you redeem yourself." Deep down, I still believed people could change, even when they had wandered far astray. And perhaps someday, Ethan might find his way back, not as an heir, but as a son who finally values love and sacrifice above all else. Trust needs boundaries and the law. Silence at the right moment is a shield, truth at the right moment is a sword. Protecting dignity and freedom in old age is not selfish, it is a duty to the departed and to oneself. My story ends here, but I want to ask you, if you were in the same situation, when your own family tried to strip you of your assets and dignity, what would you do? Would you stay calm, collect evidence, and wait for the right moment to strike back? Or would you choose to confront them directly from the very beginning? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because I believe each of us would see it differently. And if you want to keep hearing gripping stories where justice is served and greed is punished, make sure to subscribe to True Revenge Stories. Hit like and share this video so more people can discover it. Don't forget, every day we bring you new revenge stories, each one a slice of truth, betrayal, and the powerful lessons worth remembering. You can also check out more episodes in the Revenge Stories playlist, already organized by theme. Choose your next video right now, because who knows, one of these stories may mirror exactly what you or someone close to you is going through.